bills to never ever have enough time to play at all. You know everybody wants to walk in someone else's shoes. Everyone's forgotten who they are. Such a crime to waste his time away. Such a low down, goddamn dirty.
All right, welcome to Ottercreek Rio Grande. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what my channel is and what it is not. I'll tell you right now that this is not a how-to channel. I am not going to try and teach anyone any technique or anything like that. That's not my focus. I consider myself a beginner as far as model railroading goes anyway, so I'm not here to try and teach anyone anything. That being said, if I do something that helps you out, awesome. Leave a comment. Let me know that that worked. Or if you see me do something that is obviously not a good idea, leave me a comment and say, hey, try this instead. I appreciate everybody's comments. What this channel is supposed to be, is what it's going to be, is a chronicle of the construction of my model railroad. So I've got a track plan here. It's a very ambitious project. I have been told that by numerous people, just how ambitious it is. It's the overall dimensions of the room is 26 by 30, and it's going to be a dual gauge, narrow gauge model railroad. Mostly it will be probably HO scale more than anything else. The black lines you see is standard HO gauge. The red that you see is dual gauge, and then the green will be narrow gauge. The inspiration of this is based off of the Colorado and Midland Railroad at the turn of the century. That's where I'm getting most of my inspiration from. That, along with John Allen and his Gory and Defeated. If you're not familiar with that, you should be. And that's kind of where I'm going with this, is something along those lines. So just a brief overview. This is the town of Leadville. Lots of model railroading can take place in Leadville. Lots of stuff took place in Leadville at the beginning of the last century. This is going to be a little town of Malta. This is actually the project that I'm working on right now. This area right here. This is an interchange area I'm calling Arkansas Junction. This is the Hagerman Trestle, or something close to it. I know I won't be able to model it exactly, but it's going to be a representation of the Hagerman Trestle. Up here will be a representation of the Hagerman Tunnel. Up here, this little town will be what I'm going to call Peach Blow, and the main line will come through a tunnel here into the town of Basalt, which is a division point. And then the line will continue on into hidden staging underneath Leadville. That's the main line, the main direction of where the trains are going to go. There will be a branch line from Basalt through this little area here, which I'm going to call Wingo, and then down here to Aspen, and a mining area right here on the backside of Aspen. And then on the narrow gauge side of things, this will be probably the Colorado and Southern. This is the town of Como. You actually can't get there from Leadville. You have to go all the way around. This is what's going to be Climax. This is, going to be hopefully a really cool gorge. John Allen Gorge is probably what I'm going to call it. another little town here, and then back up through a loop there, and eventually come up in this area for just a little bit of staging on the back side here. But it's going to be, like I say, it's extremely ambitious. I know it is, but I plan on accomplishing this by doing things in sections. So what this video really is more about planning. If you're thinking about getting into model railroading, how you plan and how you move from point A to point B is extremely important. This will be probably my fourth or fifth attempt at a railroad. I have somewhat completed a smaller in-scale shelf model railroad that's not really worth talking about, and I've had a couple other small shelf in-scale railroads that didn't amount to much of anything. So this is going to be a much bigger scale than that, and it's also my first attempt at anything in HO. So in order to accomplish it, I've come up with this spreadsheet. It's an Excel spreadsheet. I've got multiple tabs down here at the bottom that's going to help me keep going in the right direction. So before I ever got started, even with my track planning, I decided I needed to list the priorities I wanted to accomplish with the railroad. Operation. I want to be able to operate the railroad, even if it's just by myself, in a very prototypical fashion. I need to have solid bench work and track work. Some of my in-scale, the first 2 or 3 in-scale layouts I made terrible mistakes, and I can tell you that if you don't have good bench work and good track work, it's just a never-ending source of frustration. I also want JMRI control, signaling, possibly. I haven't decided completely on that. I would like semaphores and things like that. Block detection and power districts, of course. I want really clean wiring, realistic scenery, well-planned backdrops. I'd like to light buildings, dimmable overhead lights, and if possible, hands-free coupling. These are just some things that I really want to kind of focus on as I go forward. Now, kind of going back to this, if you tried to do all this at once, I have no doubt that I would fail. So I'm going to try and do things a section at a time. So the first section that I'm going to do is this little area here called Malta. And then the next section, I'm not sure, it will probably be, if I can actually create the entire main line to basalt, that's probably what the next thing I will do, because I will find out whether or not these curvatures are going to work and the elevations. So that would be probably section 2 would be, can I get the main line to basalt, and then maybe get all of the track in basalt. Section 2 then might be going from basalt back to aspen, so that really everything on this side of the railroad from here to there might be 3 different sections of the railroad, and then the last one would be over here with the hidden staging underneath Leadville going to basalt from that direction. That'd be like a 4th section to try and complete. And then the 5th section might be getting from, say, Leadville to Como. And of course, I haven't completely decided what sections will come next, but I am going to try and accomplish things one section at a time. So in order to do that, I have a workflow, or you can think of these as phases if you want. If you've done any model railroading, you know that the first thing you probably need to do is either have a computer program like this. This is Empire Express. That's it's on Mac, of course. There's lots of other type of uh, CAD programs you can make use of specifically for model railroading. Or some people use a piece of paper, and I'll still use some paper occasionally from time to time. But that's kind of phase one, is to actually put something down in a computer or on a piece of paper saying this is the area that I have to work in, this is what I'm going to try and accomplish. Phase two, bench work. Now when you do your bench work, you still have to think about all of your track, all of your scenery, your structures, what are you going to do with your backdrop, and how is the lighting. Are you going to actually be able to light up your scenes in a way that's going to make them really easily to see, and also whether or not you can actually see to work as you're building things. So bench work, I'm calling that phase two. Track work, phase three. And again, when you do track work, you have to consider your structures and your scenery. Phase four, actually wiring. DCC. I will be doing LCC, and also the structure lighting. If you're gonna have lighted structures, you have to consider that as part of your overall wiring. Phase 5, landforms, water features. Phase 6, structures. And phase 7, fine details. This is, kind of the last thing you do is detail a scene. And as far as the phases go, a lot of these blend together. For instance, structures up here in phase 2 and bench work is down here at 6. You're going to have an idea of the size of your structure while you're doing your bench work. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to build every structure before you begin your bench work. But that is, generally speaking, this is how I think of how things should flow as you're building any one section. So again, back to here, right now I'm in the bench work phase of Malta. I'm working on the bench work. I've got some of my structures mocked up and things like that. I'm working a little bit on the landforms, and I've done a little bit of track work, because some of this stuff, again, they kind of meld together as you go. But you have to think of all of this before you actually begin. So this is just kind of an overview of how I think about things. Now this next tab here, these are mistakes. These are things that I felt worthy of actually notating to try and make sure that I don't do again. I tend to get in a hurry. We all want to see our trains run, and sometimes you end up kind of running fast to get to putting in the track work and the wiring so that you can see a train go from point A to point B. I've definitely been guilty of that. I'm trying to be patient in what I'm doing now and doing things very methodically and not getting in a hurry. I can tell you this is the first layout that I've ever done that I've actually had a track plan. Everything else I've done, I've looked at stuff. Well, this will work. I'll go with that, and then disaster incurred afterwards. This number 3, spending money on things that's not needed at the time. I'm notorious for that because I'll watch YouTube videos and I'll go, oh, that's shiny. I could use that, and I might buy a brass engine instead of, road bed, and I actually need road bed, but I don't even have any track laid for the brass engine yet. Solid bench work prevents track issues. I'm trying to really do my bench work in a way that it's not going to cause me problems. I'm trying to get better at soldering. That's another thing. I can't overstate the importance of good soldering where you're not melting your track and just making things look ugly. not planning for switch motors, didn't mock up buildings, didn't measure the area. I've had buildings that didn't fit after the fact because I didn't actually measure them. And then over here, these are some things that before I go on, I want to make sure that all of this, pretty much from here going up to this point here at Hagerman Tunnel, should be going upgrade and then downgrade from there. So I got to make sure that I test my motive power, you know, what engines I have, what can they actually go up a grade? Can I pull a 3% grade? Or can I only pull 2 cars up a 3% grade? So those are things that, again, I want to think about as I move forward. Also, if you're going upgrade and you're going around a radius, that makes a difference on how many cars you can pull. So I need to do some tests on that as well. And I plan on doing that, you know, in my section 2. Once I get this completed, Malta completed, I'm going to probably mock this up in such a way that I've got different grades and pulling around that just to kind of see how it works. Speaking of grades, well, I'll go ahead and go to this next tab here, immediate needs. Kind of going back to spending money on things you don't need. I try to evaluate things that I either need right now or things that I will need soon, more importantly than other things. And you can see right now I'm wanting to get a Raspberry Pi to control the whole layout. I'm wanting to control with a Raspberry Pi, and I did order it on 23rd of December. It should be in Monday or Tuesday. So as I think of things that, boy, I sure could use that, or I do need to get that, that's a higher priority than other things, then I will list them here. This tab, again, is it's all about planning. This is dealing with Malta and where my blocks are and turnouts, and this is, I'll probably get deeper into this as I go into wiring of Malta, so that this will probably show up again in a later video. I also have a list of structures by town. This isn't complete by any means, but like in the town of Aspen, here are the building types that I'm going to need in that area. So just kind of, again, planning ahead. You know, I might need a cinder pit eventually, things in basalt, things in peach blow, and just, does a kit exist for it? Can I buy a kit for this? How much does the kit cost? Turnouts, I'm going to, eventually I plan on making all of my own turnouts with a jig, Fast Tracks jig. Eventually I'll probably plan out how many I need to make and where they're going to be and that kind of stuff. This tab is not really fleshed out yet. Again, thinking about not spending money on things I don't need. Here are tools that I know I'm going to need in the future. I definitely need a chopper too. If I'm going to build craftsman type kits, I need something like that. And other things that I've indicated that I need, I'm just going to kind of keep track of them, and as they come up, I might add them to my immediate needs tab later on. I did some initial figuring on how much turnouts would cost, making them myself versus purchasing them, and I did decide that it should be cheaper to make them yourself if you're making a bunch of them, and I will have a lot of turnouts, you can see, so I think it will definitely be cheaper if I can make them myself. All right, so going back to here, this is kind of my phase. If you look here, this is what I'm working on right now. I'm working on this section, Malta, right here. That's the section that I've chosen to begin with. This is actually going to be a module that can be transported different locations, and my plan is to be able to remove this, take it somewhere, that kind of thing. So this is a tracking plan for that section, and you'll notice up here these are coincide with my workflow. So planning I didn't put on there because that's what this particular Excel document is my planning. But phase 2 is the bench work. So bench work, track work, DCC, LCC, wiring, structures, cars, because this is a time saver layout. There is a specific kind of game that you play with it, if you will, and there's a certain number of cars you need spotted in certain places. And again, this is my first go at HO and narrow gauge, so I have no cars basically. And then this column here is for accessories that I might need later on. So the way this works is, you can see, like right here, this red for store number 1, I do not have a store purchased yet. Okay, so where a green X is, that indicates that is purchased, it's in my possession, I'm ready to go. So the idea here is that in this time saver section, you make a list of everything you need for this, and you don't actually begin your bench work until you have everything that you need to actually finish your bench work. Same thing with the track work. I'm not going to begin any track work until I've got a green X to all of these things there beside it. Same thing with the LCC and the DCC. Raspberry Pi, I need a monitor, I need a keyboard and a mouse, but I can probably get by without these two things for a while. So that's what this is. This is just a way to keep me on track, so I don't go off on a tangent and do something that's not keeping me working in a solid direction of where I'm going. If you haven't done anything like this, maybe it'll help you. I don't know. Maybe you don't need help. Sometimes I can be scatterbrained. But that's what this is. It's my track planning guide for my model railroad. And if you're wondering, does my model railroad have a name yet? No, it really doesn't. Again, it's going to be based on the Colorado and Midland. I don't know what time era it's going to be. If I do, when it actually existed, I can only go up until like 1925, I think. I can't remember exactly when the Colorado Midland died, so to speak, but it was, before 1930 for sure. I would like to have signaling on the layout, because I just think that's neat. I like semaphores. I think it would be neat to have working semaphores that worked conditioned on blocking. A train enters this block, it's going to throw a signal a certain direction. Unfortunately, during the time frame of the Colorado and Midland, they didn't have any signaling. Neither did any of the narrow gauge railroads at that particular point in time. In fact, I'm not sure that any of the narrow gauges ever had signaling. So I might consider doing a John Allen thing and thinking, well, what would have happened if the Colorado Midland had existed into 1940, and then totally rename and actually come up with my own decals for my mode of power and everything else. I don't know. I'm not there yet, and bottom line, I don't really care because it's my railroad. And if I want to run a modern diesel on this railroad, then I will. But that's yet to be seen. I'm still working on this section right here, Malta. So thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to follow me. I plan on chronicling all of this so that you can see what's going on. I appreciate your viewership.